to happen is something that has just become completely polarized along left, right, or Democratic versus Republican lines. And I just want to emphasize, for me, the most amazing thing about all of this wasn't so much that there were key facts the government knew that we subsequently discovered. And I've become a big critic of The Intercept, and I do think they deserve credit there. My hypothesis is that they did that FOIA request with the expectation that it would debunk a lot of the claims about EcoHealth and Peter Daszak, and they got this material and it did the opposite. And, to their credit, they published what they got. Good for them, but it was the most valuable contribution to understanding this. It wasn't just that this information was kept hidden. People were banned by big tech policy from questioning Fauci's narrative about the origins of the COVID pandemic until the Biden administration itself came out and said, you know what, we also are uncertain about this and we're going to investigate. And only then did Facebook and then Twitter and Google say we're now going to permit a discussion of this. It wasn't just that the government hid information, they prohibited any questioning of it on our primary means of communication. All right, let me ask you, to conclude what I now officially consider to be part one of our interview and our discussion. But I do want to give you this chance to talk about this because it's something, you and I had the chance to discuss. I then went after our discussion and read a bunch of stuff and found where this is coming from, and it is not obscure sites. But as I said, the New York Times, I think the headline of the profile about you that I quoted was something like the Dr. Shock Doctrine or something like that, or, the idea that you were this leading ideologue of neoliberal cruelties, that you took distressed economies and forced the majority of the population to suffer for the benefit of the elites of those societies and international capital, that you are the avatar of neoliberalism and cruel disaster capitalism. And the Shock Doctrine is something so embedded in so many narratives. We had an opportunity to talk about why you regard that as a misperception. So I don't necessarily want to walk through the whole history just for the sake of time, but I do want to give you a chance, since I have trifled with this belief in the past, something I absorbed uncritically, to go ahead and address why you think that's an unfair assessment.
It's not just unfair, it's completely silly. Completely silly. I wanted to read something that I said in September 1989.
In the New Yorker interview.
In an interview with New Yorker. I don't know if you saw that.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, I said, look, I'm no particular fan of Milton Friedman's or Margaret Thatcher's or Ronald Reagan's version of the free market. In the United States terms, I'd be identified as a liberal Democrat, and the country I admire the most is Sweden. Okay, I was a social democrat from a kid, a social democrat. So this whole idea of, now, the main thing I was trying to do and succeeded in doing with Poland and completely failed with Russia was to try to get some financial help to a country in crisis. Because as we discussed, I had imbibed what I really regard as a wonderful and correct view, and I practiced it in my career successfully, a view of John Maynard Keynes in 1919 and the economic consequences of the peace, where he basically says, be nice to the country that's in distress, because otherwise you can really get harm. And of course, Keynes wrote that book in protest of the Versailles Treaty and said the way that the Versailles Treaty is going to squeeze Germany is going to lead to the rise of horrors in the next generation unless we do something different. Very prophetic, and I took it very deeply, and that's why even in my first outing as an economic advisor, my main pitch was cancel Bolivia's debts because it's in hyperinflation. Stop squeezing this impoverished country. That's how I came to be an advisor to Poland, because they said, oh, can you help us with our debts? And I said, absolutely, I can. And I said to the White House, cancel Poland's debts. And lo and behold, they said, yes, absolutely. And I thought, God, I'm really so clever. They followed just what I said.
And then on to Russia.
And then on to Russia. And I said, okay, we see how it works. Cancel Russia's debts. Hell no. Are you crazy? And so I didn't understand. I said, I gave good advice. I showed, you stabilize, you restore economic growth. But with Russia, nothing that I said was accepted. It had nothing to do with shock this and privatize. I wasn't even part of that stuff. I was trying to mobilize a debt standstill, which means you stop paying because you ran out of money, and permanent relief, and an emergency ruble stabilization fund, and finance for even, I think in that New York Times article, for healthcare. That's where I was spending my time on. We got to make sure the clinics are functioning. So everything that was said afterwards is so weird. But, one that pinned it on me was actually the Clinton administration, which did nothing. And then Strobe Talbot, in his clever line, said, "Too much shock, no therapy." And you know what? God damn it, he gave no therapy. He was in the government. I was pounding them, do some therapy, help. And they were doing absolutely nothing. And by the way, I just printed out in November 1991. This is before there's independent Russia. I said, now the Cold War and the collapse of communism have left Russia as a prostrate, frightened, and unstable, as was Germany after World War I and World War II. Inside Russia, Western aid would have the galvanizing psychological and political effect that the Marshall Plan had for Western Europe. Russia's psyche has been tormented by 1,000 years of brutal invasions, stretching from Genghis Khan to Napoleon and Hitler. I was pressing, that was my job, was to try to help get some relief. And this got weirdly conflated with all sorts of things, but the opposite of what I believed, completely the opposite. And I quit early on, as I told you, in the end of 1993, because I was having no benefit from, I could not get the United States to do anything. Neither the Bush administration nor the Clinton administration. They were, because already the neocons were in full sway, but I had no idea.
And wanted a weak Russia, and wanted a weak, crippled Russia to expand further.
Let me read
Go ahead.
Yeah, let me read you what I wrote in 2014 in BBC. NATO's continued desire, expressed again just recently, to add Ukraine to its membership, thereby putting NATO right up on the Russian border, must be regarded as profoundly unwise and provocative. And then I said, in 1914, 1989, 2014, we live in the spread of NATO and by U.S. bullying since 1991. Come on, this has been my position all along. You help a country in distress or you face consequences, but this country became nastier and nastier in its politics because our domestic political system went completely plutocratic, and our foreign policy went completely hegemonic. And this is a disaster for us. This is where we are today. We have a plutocracy at home, and we have a wannabe hegemonic rule abroad. Of course, it's so anachronistic. The whole world, other than a small part of the world, which is the European Union, UK, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Korea, and Singapore. Those are the only ones on our side. All the rest of the world is saying, stop, we don't want a hegemon. We want normal cooperation. But we've lost it in this country because the politics are so damn corrupt at home, all driven by money, including the military-industrial complex, which is a major lobby pushing for NATO enlargement, NATO weaponry, everything. And then abroad, the Nuland administration foreign policy,
right.
which is expand everywhere and overthrow governments that don't like where you want to expand.
It is remarkable just how the continuity of these policies, while we keep hearing these elections are the most important in our lifetime, the parties are so radically different they can't agree on anything, and yet there is this remarkable continuity, and that's the first thing I observed when I started writing about the Bush and Cheney administration, and I was moved by President Obama's passionate vow to uproot it all, and then I watched him not only uproot none of it, but expand and enlarge virtually all of it, and that was my sort of coming of age lesson. I really want to thank you.
I can tell you, Glenn, My wife and I love a biography, a documentary of Gore Vidal that was filmed towards the end of his life. And he's sitting in his villa in Italy on the night of Obama's election. And they announce on the screen Obama's won. And the cameras go up to Gore Vidal. Aren't you excited? And he's completely, no, I'm not excited. Why aren't you excited? He says, because by the time you've gotten to be president, you've sold your soul so many times, it makes no difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, he was somebody who, used to be enamored of Democratic Party politics, a friend of the Kennedys and the like, and then he finally saw enough, and he became a super interesting figure by the end of his life. Again, thank you so much. This was definitely as enlightening as I expected and knew it would be. I'm very much looking forward to at least part 2, and we'll see how much we get through the other questions I had and the topics I wanted to discuss. But I really appreciate your time, and I hope to see you again shortly.
Hey, phenomenal. I'm going to hold you to part 2 because it's a lot of fun, and I'm learning a lot from you, so it's great.
Mutually. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.